The marketplace was loud, filled with smoke, dust, and the cries of traders. It was a place where the poor suffered and the powerful ruled. At the far edge stood a man, a human, his clothes old and torn, his face tired but his eyes alive. He was broke, carrying nothing but a small pouch of credits tied to his belt. He had walked for hours under the hot twin suns, hunger burning in his stomach. His body was weak, his hands rough from labor that never paid enough. But his heart, still strong, told him to keep moving, to keep fighting, even when the galaxy had forgotten him. That day, a crowd was gathering near the auction block. The human pushed through, curious, but also uneasy. He saw what the crowd had come for. Two small alien girls stood together, their hands chained, their faces pale with fear. They were sisters, and they clung to each other, whispering quietly. The auctioneer shouted, his voice sharp, announcing the sale of the girls. The crowd cheered, coins rattled, aliens of many kinds raised their hands to bid. Behind them, on a tall seat, sat the overlord, a ruthless alien with sharp teeth, heavy jewels, and cruel eyes. He laughed as the bidding began, his voice heavy like thunder. The human's chest grew tight as he watched. The sisters trembled, trying to stay strong. But he could see their fear. He remembered his own younger days, when he too had been helpless, when no one had stood for him. A fire lit inside him. The bidding started low, numbers rising fast. Merchants waved their hands, eager to buy. Some wanted workers, some wanted worse. The alien overlord raised the price higher, his voice mocking, his smile cruel. Others fell silent, too afraid to challenge him. The human's fists clenched, his pouch was nearly empty, his life already broken. Yet he felt his feet moving, pushing him forward. His heart told him he could not let the sisters be torn apart. Not today, not while he was here. He stood among the buyers, the crowd turning to look. They laughed when they saw him. A poor human with nothing but rags. They whispered that he had no chance, no hope. But the human lifted his hand, his voice steady. I bid. The market grew silent for a moment, then burst into laughter. The overlord sneered, flashing his sharp teeth. He raised the price again, daring the human to quit. The human's eyes did not move. His mind counted the credits in his pouch. He knew he had little, but he also knew he could not walk away. The sisters' wide eyes locked on him, filled with both fear and hope. The first bid was made, and the struggle had begun. The human stood alone against wealth, power, and cruelty. He was broke, but he would fight hard. He did not yet know if he could win, but in his heart, he already knew he could not give up. And as the suns burned above and the crowd roared around him, the fate of the little alien sisters had just begun to change. The crowd grew restless as the first bids echoed through the market. Voices overlapped, coins rattled, and the smell of sweat and dust filled the air. But through all of this chaos, one presence ruled the space. It was the overlord, the cruel alien whose name alone made buyers lower their heads. He was massive, with broad shoulders covered in golden silk. His eyes were dark and sharp, glowing faintly in the dim light. Rings made of strange metals covered his thick fingers. Each time he raised his hand, the auctioneer's voice shook with respect. The overlord was feared not just because of his wealth, but because of his power. He controlled guards, traders, even the law. In his mind, no poor man could challenge him. The human felt the weight of that presence. He had faced hunger, cold nights, and the silence of empty pockets, but never a creature like this. The alien overlord leaned forward, studying him. A cruel smile spread across his face, and laughter rolled from his throat. Is this a joke? The overlord growled, his voice heavy like thunder. A starving human dares to stand against me. His guards laughed with him, their weapons flashing in the sunlight. The crowd joined, pointing and mocking. They called the human weak, foolish, already broken. The two sisters clung to each other tighter, their thin arms wrapped together as if they would vanish if separated. One whispered to the other in a language the human did not know, but their eyes, wide and wet, spoke louder than words. They looked at him not with mockery, but with hope, fragile hope, as if he might be their last chance. The bidding rose higher. The overlord lifted his hand lazily, calling out numbers far above what most buyers could pay. Each time his voice carried, others stepped back, unwilling to challenge him. The human clenched his teeth, His pouch felt smaller with every sound of coin. When his turn came again, he lifted his hand. His voice was rough but clear. "I bid." The crowd burst into laughter once more. But this time, something was different. The human did not lower his eyes. His stare locked on the overlord, steady and unbroken. The overlord's grin widened. His pride demanded that he crush this poor man. He shouted another number. Higher. Louder. His rings clinked together as he raised his thick hand. Guards shifted behind him, waiting for his command. But again, the human raised his hand. His heart pounded in his chest. His breath felt heavy. His body screamed for him to stop, to give up. Yet his spirit pushed him forward. He saw the sisters standing there, their chains cold against their wrists, and he could not let go. The auctioneer's eyes darted nervously between the two. Sweat rolled down his forehead. Never had a human dared to push against the overlord. Never had someone with nothing risked so much. The buyers muttered among themselves, whispers spreading through the crowd. Some admired the human's courage, some pitied him, but all waited to see how far he would go. The overlord leaned back, his smile fading into something darker. He had expected the man to break after the first laugh. Now he felt the irritation of being challenged. His pride was not used to resistance. He slammed his hand against the armrest of his chair, the sound echoing like a drum. "You are wasting your life," the overlord hissed, his voice cut through the air. "These sisters belong to me. You cannot win." But the human did not move. His face was pale, his hands trembling, but his eyes glowed with something stronger than fear. He whispered to himself, words only he could hear. I must keep them together." The sisters' chains clinked as they shuffled closer to each other. Their eyes never left him. In that moment, he felt their silent cry reach his soul. He was broke, but he was not empty. He still had something more valuable than all the overlord's coins. He had will. The bidding battle pressed on, each number higher than the last. Sweat ran down his back, the weight of his pouch heavy in his thoughts. But every time the overlord tried to crush him with wealth, he lifted his hand again. The crowd was no longer laughing. They were silent now, drawn by the strange duel, a cruel giant of wealth against a broken man of spirit. And in that silence, the human stood taller, his voice, rough and simple, cut through the air once more. "I bid." The auctioneer's voice cracked as he repeated the number. The overlord's smile disappeared, replaced with cold rage. The sisters' eyes shone brighter, a glimmer of belief building in their hearts. The human knew he was walking a dangerous path. He knew he could lose more than his coins. But as the overlord's shadow darkened the market, he also knew one truth. He would not stop. He would not walk away. The ruthless alien had power, wealth, and fear on his side. But the broke human had something else, something the galaxy had forgotten: humanity, courage, and the stubborn fire that refuses. The crowd was no longer filled with laughter. A strange silence had fallen, broken only by the sound of chains rattling on the sisters' wrists and the auctioneer's nervous voice. The human stood still, his shoulders squared, his eyes fixed on the overlord. The poor man who should have been ignored had somehow become the center of the market. The auctioneer cleared his throat, his hands shaking. He called the last number again, louder this time. "The bid stands," he shouted, trying to keep control. Sweat ran down his neck. He had never seen anything like this before. The overlord leaned forward, his teeth glinting in the light. "You dare defy me," he whispered. His words carried across the block like the hiss of a blade. The guards at his side shifted, their hands resting on their weapons. The air grew heavy. The crowd leaned closer, waiting for the next move. The human's chest rose and fell as if every breath was a battle. His pouch of credits felt like a stone against his waist. Every number shouted cut deeper into his soul. He knew he could not win against the wealth of the overlord. He knew every coin he owned might not be enough. Yet something in him refused to bend. The auctioneer raised his hand again. "Do we have another bid?" he asked. His voice trembled. The overlord smirked, his hand lifted, his rings flashing. He named a number that made gasps rise from the crowd. It was higher than most men could dream of paying. His voice was calm, cold, confident. He was certain the human would crumble. But then, to the shock of all, the human lifted his hand once more. His voice came out rough but steady. "I bid." The market froze. No laughter followed. Only whispers. The buyers stared, wondering if the human had gone mad. The sister's eyes widened. The older of the two pressed her forehead against her sister's, tears running down her cheeks. The younger whispered something soft, clutching her hand tighter. They could not understand why this man, a stranger, would fight for them. But they felt something change. The hopeless fear in their eyes began to flicker with something new, belief. The overlord laughed, the sound deep and bitter. "You think you can fight me with scraps," he roared. His voice thundered, shaking the air. He slammed another number down, his tone mocking, cruel. The guards clapped their hands, enjoying the show. The human's stomach twisted. His hands trembled as he touched the pouch at his side. He could feel how light it was. He knew every bid he made brought him closer to ruin. But then his eyes rose again, drawn to the sisters. They were so small, so fragile. Their voices were silent, but their tears spoke louder than words. He could not let them be broken apart. He raised his hand again, his voice cracked, but carried. "I bid." The auctioneer's mouth fell open. He repeated the number with disbelief. The crowd gasped. Some shook their heads. Some murmured that the man was insane. Yet others whispered quietly, voices carrying through the market. "Human courage," they said. "This is why they fear his kind." The overlord's smile faded. His jaw tightened. He had thought this would be entertainment, a show to crush a poor man and make the crowd laugh. But now, every bid the human made chipped at his pride. He could not allow this struggle to continue without punishment. His eyes burned with anger. "Do you know what happens to those who challenge me?" The overlord hissed, his voice low but sharp. The human did not answer. He only lifted his chin. His silence was louder than any threat. The sisters shivered at the overlord's tone. They pressed closer together. But their eyes never left the man. Their fear was still there. But so was hope. They saw someone standing for them. Someone risking everything. The bidding war dragged on. Coins clinked as scribes marked the numbers. The crowd swayed between awe and terror. Some wanted the human to win. Some prayed he would stop before he was destroyed. The human's body felt weaker with each breath, but his spirit grew heavier, stronger. He had no great weapons, no rich allies, no power. All he had was a small pouch of credits and the will to stand. And in that moment, that will was more dangerous than any weapon. When the auctioneer called the next number, the overlord leaned back, his eyes narrowed. He had no doubt he could crush the human with coin. But now it was no longer about the sisters. It was about pride. He could not allow a poor human to stand against him. The human raised his hand again, his voice steady. "I bid." The market roared with gasps. The bidding battle had crossed into madness, but no one could look away. The fate of the sisters was no longer just a sale. It had become a war, a duel between cruelty and humanity. And as the dust hung heavy in the air and the suns burned above, every eye in the market knew one truth. This fight was far from over. The auction block shook with tension. The human stood unmoving, yet his body felt heavy as stone. Every time the auctioneer shouted a number, his heart pounded harder. His pouch of credits was small, too small for this battle. Still, his hand rose again and again. Each lift was like lifting a mountain, but he would not let go. The overlord's voice thundered across the market. "I bid higher." His tone was sharp, meant to break. His teeth flashed. His eyes burned with cruel delight. Around him, guards smirked, their hands near their blades. They were ready to punish the human if he dared too far. The crowd whispered. The poor among them stared at the human with wide eyes. Some felt his struggle as if it was their own. They too had lived with nothing. They too had been crushed by the rich. To see someone stand now, even against the overlord, was like seeing a spark in darkness. The sisters trembled. Their thin arms clutched together, but their eyes clung to him. The younger pressed her head against the older's shoulder, silent tears streaking her cheeks. The older whispered softly, her voice shaking but filled with hope. "He is not leaving us." The words were small, yet they carried into the human's heart. His mind screamed at him to stop. His pouch was nearly empty. His stomach twisted with fear, but his spirit would not bend. He remembered nights on frozen streets, when no one came to help him. He remembered watching others suffer while the rich turned away. He swore then that if ever he had a chance, he would not walk away. The auctioneer lifted his voice again. Calling another number, sweat poured from his brow. He had never seen such madness. The overlord's smile grew wider. His numbers came fast, confident, crushing. Each call was like a hammer against the human's will. But the human's hand lifted once more, his voice cracked but steady. "I bid." Gasps erupted. The crowd shook with disbelief. Some clapped in secret. Quiet hands pressed together in respect. Others whispered warnings. "He will be killed," they said. "The overlord will not forgive." The overlord leaned back, his eyes cold. His pride was wounded. He had expected this to end quickly. But the human's stubbornness scratched at his honor. This was no longer about credits. It was about humiliation. A poor human was standing equal with him, and that could not be allowed. The sisters' eyes shone with tears, but not all from fear. They saw the man's trembling hands, his sweat, his broken clothes. Yet he stood taller with every bid. For the first time, they felt the warmth of hope, fragile yet alive. The human's chest ached. Every bid was like cutting away a piece of his life. He knew once his pouch emptied, he would be destroyed, yet his heart whispered louder than fear. "If I stop, they will be lost forever." The auctioneer's voice grew weak, his throat dry from shouting. The numbers climbed higher, reaching levels that made even the richest merchants step back. None dared to interfere. They knew this was a war, not an auction. The overlord's laughter grew darker. "Do you think you can beat me, human?" he snarled. "You are nothing." His words sliced through the air like blades. The guards stepped forward slightly, their weapons gleaming. But the human did not move. He stared back, his silence stronger than words. He raised his hand again. His voice was soft, almost broken, but clear. "I bid." The crowd gasped once more. No laughter came, only awe. The poor among them whispered, "This is courage. This is humanity." The overlord's face twisted with anger. His pride was bleeding. The idea of losing to this ragged man burned inside him. His fists clenched, his teeth ground together. He leaned forward, his voice low but filled with venom. "I will break you." The human's legs trembled. His breath came heavy. His pouch felt lighter than air. But he would not kneel. He could not kneel. The sisters' eyes held him up when his body threatened to fall. Their hope was now tied to his soul. The struggle was no longer about money. It was no longer about survival. It was about something greater. It was about proving that even the weakest human could stand against the strongest cruelty. It was about showing that humanity's heart was worth more than all the overlord's wealth. And as the market stood frozen, every voice silent, the human raised his hand again, his voice cutting through the thick air. "I bid." The auctioneer's voice cracked as he shouted the new number. The crowd trembled. The sisters clung together, their eyes wet with light. The overlord's fury burned hotter than the suns above. The struggle was reaching its peak. The human was close to breaking. But so was the pride of the overlord. One would have to fall, and the market held its breath to see who it would be. The market had turned into a storm. Every breath, every whisper, every sound was heavy with tension. The poor human stood in the center, his shoulders shaking, his hands still raised. The crowd could not look away. Some had tears in their eyes. Some had fear, but all knew they were watching something that had never happened before. The auctioneer's face was pale. His voice cracked as he called the last number. Sweat poured from his brow. He wanted the madness to end. But the overlord was not finished. The cruel alien leaned forward, his golden robes shining in the sun. His voice rolled out like thunder. "I raise again." The number he shouted made the ground seem to shake. Gasps erupted. The merchants stepped back, their faces pale. None dared to join the bidding anymore. The overlord's power was crushing. His wealth seemed endless. The guards smirked, certain the human would finally fall. The human's chest burned. His pouch felt almost empty. His hands shook as if the weight of the galaxy pressed on them. His stomach twisted, and for a moment, darkness swam before his eyes. He could hear the whispers around him, voices saying he was finished, that he had reached the end. But then, he looked at the sisters, their small forms chained together, their hands gripping each other so tightly as if they would vanish if torn apart. Their eyes met his, filled with fear but also with trust. That fragile trust pierced through his despair. It was like a flame in the dark. He remembered a night long ago, when he was a boy, cold and hungry. When he had lost someone he loved, no one had helped him, no one had cared. He had sworn in that silence that if he ever could, he would fight for someone else. He would not let them be broken as he had been. His throat was dry, his breath shallow, his pouch was light, yet his heart shouted louder than his fear. He raised his hand again, his voice cracked, but carried. "I bid." The crowd gasped, some clapped, unable to stop themselves, some whispered prayers, others shook their heads, fearing what would follow. The auctioneer's hands trembled as he repeated the number. His eyes darted between the human and the overlord. The overlord's laughter exploded, bitter and cruel. His teeth shone sharp, his voice cut through the air. "You are finished, human. You cannot go further." His hand rose again. His voice thundered with another number. Higher. "Impossible." The crowd gasped louder. The human's legs weakened, his knees nearly buckled. His pouch was almost empty. He touched it, feeling the small weight inside. He knew this was the end, his last chance. If he failed now, the sisters would be lost forever. The world around him seemed to fade. The noise of the market dulled. He could hear only the pounding of his own heart. He looked once more at the sisters, their faces pale, their eyes shining with desperate hope. Their lips trembled as if they wanted to call to him, but no sound came. He clenched his fists, his body shaking, his spirit screaming. With a roar that broke the silence, he tore the pouch from his belt. Coins spilled into his hand. His voice cracked but powerful. "This is all I have, and I bid it all." The market fell silent. The coins glimmered in his trembling palm. The crowd froze. Even the auctioneer's voice stopped, his eyes wide. The overlord's laughter died in his throat. His smile twisted into rage. The human threw the last coin onto the table. His voice carried strong. "They stay together." The sisters gasped. Their chains rattled as they leaned closer to each other. Their tears spilled freely. Their eyes locked on him. In that moment, they saw not a poor man, not a stranger, but a protector. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some shouted in shock, some cheered, some wept. The auctioneer's hands shook as he called the bid, his voice barely a whisper at first, then louder. "The human bids all he has." The overlord's face darkened, his fists clenched so tight his rings cut into his flesh. His pride burned hotter than fire. To be challenged was one thing, but to be beaten, to be cornered by a broke human with nothing but scraps, that was an insult he could not accept. The human swayed on his feet, his body exhausted, his pouch empty. He had given everything. He could give no more. The crowd waited, the air thick as stone. All eyes turned to the overlord. The ruthless alien leaned forward, his voice a growl. His pride demanded one more strike. But his eyes saw something dangerous. It was not the coins that frightened him. It was the human spirit, the will that refused to die. That fire could not be crushed with wealth. The human stood, pale and trembling, but unbroken, his hand still raised, his voice still echoing. They stayed together. And the crowd knew. The breaking point had come. One side would fall. The poor human had nothing left to give, but his heart still burned. The overlord had endless wealth, but his pride was crumbling. The sisters held their breath, waiting to see who would win their fate. The marketplace was frozen. Every face was turned toward the center where the broke human stood. His pouch was empty, his hands shaking, yet his eyes burned like fire. The last of his coins lay on the table, shining weakly in the dusty light. His voice still echoed in the air. They stay together. The sisters clung to one another, tears streaming down their cheeks. Their chains rattled softly as they leaned closer. The older whispered to the younger, "He will not leave us." Their words were small, but they carried hope, fragile but alive. The overlord sat still in his golden chair, his chest heaved with slow, angry breaths. His eyes narrowed, his rings tapped against the armrest like the beat of war drums. The crowd waited, silent, tense. They knew this moment was no longer about money. It was about pride. The auctioneer's voice cracked as he repeated the bid. "The human offers all." His throat was dry. His hands shook. He had never seen such madness before, never seen such courage. The crowd murmured, some whispering prayers, some clutching their robes. The overlord leaned forward, his teeth bared, his voice rolled out heavy. "You dare challenge me with scraps, He raised his hand. His voice thundered. He shouted another number, higher than anything before. The market gasped. Merchants stepped back. Guards smirked, believing the battle was done. But the human did not move. He did not lower his eyes. His chest rose and fell. His body swayed. Weak as if the weight of the galaxy was pressing him down, yet his voice rose again, steady and sharp. I have no more coins, but I give my life with them. I bid everything. The market erupted. Shock spread like fire. No one had ever heard such words. A bid not of money but of soul. Some cried out in fear, others in awe. The poor among the crowd shouted, human spirit. They clapped their hands. Some fell to their knees, whispering that they had never seen such defiance. The sisters gasped, their eyes wide. Their chains clinked as they pulled each other closer. Their voices cracked, calling softly, don't stop, don't leave us. For the first time, their fear was mixed with belief. The overlord's jaw tightened. His pride screamed for him to crush the man. Yet his eyes saw something dangerous. The human spirit was not bending, not breaking. It burned brighter with every breath, brighter than wealth, brighter than power. That fire was something no coin could buy, no threat could silence. The crowd felt it too. They leaned closer, their whispers rising. This man is broke, yet richer than him. They said, this is what it means to be human. The auctioneer trembled. His voice faltered as he tried to ask for more. But the words stuck in his throat. Who could outbid life itself? Who could outbid courage? The overlord's hand twitched, his face twisted. He wanted to shout another number, to smash the man's will, but hesitation cracked his confidence. For the first time, his wealth felt small. For the first time, his power felt thin. The silence pressed on him heavier than chains. The human's voice rang again, softer now, yet sharper than any blade. They stay together. His body swayed, his legs weak, but his eyes never moved from the sisters. He had nothing left, but still, he stood. The sisters sobbed. Their tears ran down their faces, but their smiles trembled through them. They saw not just a savior, but a miracle. They whispered to each other, he will keep us safe. The overlord slammed his fist against the armrest. The sound cracked through the market like thunder. His face burned red with rage. His pride was torn, but his power felt cornered. If he pressed further, if he shouted another number, the crowd might turn. They might see weakness instead of strength. He felt their eyes judging him, weighing him. The poor human, empty and broken, had trapped him. His wealth no longer mattered. His cruelty no longer commanded fear. For the first time, the overlord hesitated. The crowd gasped. Their whispers swelled. They could feel it. The balance was shifting. The human stood trembling, his body at its limit, but his spirit taller than mountains. He had given everything, his coins, his voice, even his life. And in that moment, he was stronger than the richest alien in the galaxy. The auctioneer's voice finally broke the silence, his throat dry, his words shaking. The human stands with the highest bid. His voice cracked as he shouted it louder. The sisters belonged to him. The market roared. Some cheered. Some wept. The poor raised their voices in awe. The overlord sat frozen, his pride shattered, his rage burning like fire in his chest. He had been outbid not by wealth, but by something greater. The human's body swayed, his chest weak, but his eyes still locked on the sisters. His lips whispered one last time, you are safe now. And the market knew, the final bid had been cast. Humanity had won. The market erupted like a storm. Some voices cheered, some wept, some shouted in disbelief. For the first time in years, the auction block had not bent to the will of the overlord. Instead, a broke human, ragged and tired, had risen above him. His last words still rang in the air. You are safe now. The auctioneer's voice shook as he declared the bid final. The sisters belonged to the human. His words rolled out like thunder, echoing across the marketplace. The scribes wrote quickly, their hands trembling. None of them had ever seen a sale like this. The sisters cried, their chains rattling as they fell against each other. The older whispered through her sobs, we are together. The younger clutched her hand, whispering the same words over and over. Their tears were no longer only of fear, but of relief. The human's chest rose and fell heavily. His legs trembled as he stepped forward. Every breath felt like fire, every step a mountain, yet his spirit carried him. His hand reached out, and he touched the cold iron chains that bound the sisters. The auctioneer hesitated, looking nervously at the overlord, but the crowd roared for him to obey. His hands shook as he unlocked the cuffs. The chains fell to the ground with a heavy clang. The sound cut through the market like music. For the first time, the sisters were free. The older sister clutched the human's arm, her small hands gripping tightly. The younger pressed against his side, their eyes filled with tears and light. They looked at him not as a stranger anymore, but as the only shield they had. The crowd began to chant softly, words rising like a wave. Human courage, human heart. Some clapped, some bowed their heads. Even those who had mocked him now watched with awe. The poor among them stood taller, as if his victory was their own. But not all voices were kind. In the back, whispers of fear spread. The overlord will not forgive this. He will strike again. The guards stood still, their faces tense, waiting for their master's command. The overlord sat frozen on his golden chair, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. His pride was shattered. His wealth had failed him. His cruelty had been mocked. The laughter he once commanded was gone, replaced by silence. His eyes burned with rage as he stared at the human. His teeth gritted until blood touched his lips. He rose slowly, towering over the crowd, his voice a growl, low but filled with venom. This is not over. The market trembled with his words. His robes flared as he turned. His guards followed, silent but deadly. They vanished into the shadows, but the air carried his promise of vengeance. The human stood still, his body weak but his spirit unbroken. The sisters clung to him, their chains gone, their tears shining like light on their cheeks. He looked down at them, his lips trembling, his voice soft but steady. You are free, and you will stay together. The crowd erupted once more. Some cheered, some bowed. The story would spread far beyond this market. Tales of a broke human who fought not with wealth, not with weapons, but with courage. A man who outbid a cruel alien with the last of his strength. The human took a deep breath. His eyes scanned the market. He saw the faces of the poor, the broken, the hopeless. And in their eyes, he saw something he had not seen before. Hope. The sisters held his hands tightly, their small fingers digging into his palms. They whispered together, "Don't leave us." His heart ached. He knew he could not abandon them. He knew his path had changed forever. As the sun sank lower and shadows stretched across the market, the human walked away slowly, the sisters at his side, their chains left broken on the ground behind them. The sound of his footsteps carried strength, carried defiance, carried a promise. The overlord's shadow loomed in silence. His pride demanded revenge. His cruelty demanded blood. This battle was over, but the war was not. The galaxy had seen what happened today. The story would spread like fire, a warning to the powerful, and a reminder to the weak. One broke human had stood against wealth and cruelty. One human had shown that even in the darkest place, courage could shine brighter than gold. And as he walked away with the sisters clinging to him, the galaxy whispered a truth it would never forget. Humanity had won.